if you look at environmental problems, there's different sociological contexts for environmental problems. One of them I like is the analytical deliberative model. Analytical deliberative model says there's people that do analysis and then there's deliberation by the stakeholders. The problem with the analytical deliberative model is it assumes that, intuitively, it assumes that you guys go out and do science, you analyze it, you tell the stakeholders a number, and they responsibly utilize those numbers to come up with a reasonable decision. And that's not the way it works. The analysis is ongoing with the deliberation. So how do you maintain analysis with deliberation at the same time? And so my proposal that I didn't fill out a human subjects thing, but since I was shaking 6 times a day, I felt like it was okay. And just started an experiment by being a scientific referee. So the legal thing's the same. It's me, not OSU. So when you deal with environmental problems, people talk about it like it's the angry mob fun run, and that everybody's an irrational actor. If you have a problem that has irrational actors, run away. You can't help that. You as a scientist, if you're thinking about a problem that has irrational actors, you can't fix crazy. So I'm not going to help you with that type of problem. Somebody calls you and they say, we should have this change. And you're like, you can't change that. If that's your belief that you can't possibly change that and what they're asking for is absolutely irrational, this isn't for you. I didn't feel like this problem was an irrational problem. This was rational actors. And this was people that said, I don't want my house shaking. And people saying, we don't want to shut down our industry. And you go, well, that seems rational, but we need to fix this. How do you want to fix it? Well, we'll ignore it. No, you should shut it all down. Oh, okay. So having a technical reality referee, what that role is to say, okay, these are things we know, these are things we don't know, this is uncertain, this is very certain. And so typically in science what we do is we say, yeah, these are the right answers, and you giggle at the wrong answers. Right? You go, yeah, they believe these things. They believe the weird things because it seemed reasonable to them. And so we have to talk about both the things that the peer-reviewed subject supports, but also the things that you go, well, that's crazy, or you don't know what you're talking about, and you label out why these particular things aren't true based on the data, what things are possible and not possible for the science. And what induced seismicity is great because people wanted the injection well to make earthquakes around it and that you point to that one. And you go, well, never how it happens. Well, could you make it happen that way? No. So you start out telling people that this is what I'm trying to do. And I told people, look, I'm not the environmentalist telling you I'm going to shut down the industry. I'm not the industry guy trying to tell you to shut off all the oil wells. I'm here to tell you what the reality is about this on a technical basis so that you can become informed. What happened with this experiment was that when I went to the first meeting, I actually wasn't supposed to be there. There was one scientist that was supposed to talk in a panel, and they put up a poster at the library with a big oil rig and said, problems with energy production in Oklahoma or something like this, or fracking or something. And here's the scientists who are going to speak. And so they're going to speak about building trailer parks, about how it affected clothing, how it affected, and then the one scientist was going to look at, you could get paid to take drilling mud and spread it on your land. And what that mean for diesel mud versus saline mud, and how much should you get paid, and what does that look like on a scientific basis. But nobody was going to answer any questions about wells, nobody's going to answer any questions about earthquakes. And the other scientist said, well, somebody better talk about this because I'm going to guess there's going to be some questions because we've been shaking a lot lately. So he gave me a call the night before, and I had worked on a project with him, and I don't know if I was dumb enough or smart enough or whatever it was, but I said, okay. And I was the guy at the end of the panel that wasn't supposed to be there, and it turned into me answering questions for 2 hours while everybody looked at each other. Because all the questions were geological in nature. So if as a geologist I didn't go there, they would have talked about building trailer parks during oil booms, and everybody would have been kind of angry that nobody had any real answers for them, and OSU is supposed to provide answers, but nobody was going to do that. So in terms of telling the public about something, we normally do what I call vinegar baking soda science, right? So we make a volcano, we put a little vinegar and baking soda together, and we can write the formula for it, and hey, it smells bad and gets foamy, and you can add food coloring, right? No, that's the kind of science we teach, which you go, okay, well, I understand that, except all the problems we have are stuff that you can't see and that are hard to understand. So we go, this is science, and you go, well, that's not the problem I have a hard problem. And you guys don't solve hard problems because you've only showed me easy problems. So in terms of knowing, this one you can know because you can keep repeating it. You can keep making it happen. But we can go to more religious sorts of things. How do you know the Earth's round? And there's basketball players regularly demonstrating that you need to teach this to people. But in terms of that, they don't know. They've not seen it. They've not been off the planet. They don't know if you faked that. There's nice websites that'll tell you we faked this whole thing here, right? And we don't fly there every day. If commercial airlines flights stopped and we waited 1,000 years and all the planes decayed away, they'd tell you maybe this is something we developed in a video somewhere, right? And we never actually flew. It's hard to fly stuff off the ground. We've never done that. So most folks are learning this by a faith-based thing of, you seemed reasonable to me about what you're telling me. They're not saying, can you show me your data that you collected on hydraulic conductivity and pressure? Nobody asked for that from me. So any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And I had one of the folks from the oil industry said, horizontal wells are our moonshot. We go down and we go out a couple miles with a drill rig from the top. If you think about it, that's crazy. And that's true. It's pretty magical. And so assuming somebody's going to understand, if I start talking about drill pipe or different things about how that works, I'm not talking to anybody in that room in terms of talking with the public. Here's a sort of famous problem that we've got. Our entire discipline doesn't know how to measure temperature. And it's not that we don't know how to measure temperature, it's that we don't know how to communicate it to humans, right? So obviously we have a problem that, well, all you guys keep saying the world's warming up. Yeah, but you guys don't know how to measure temperature. I think temperature's easy enough, but we get in trouble with this stuff about how we measure things and this assumption that it's a problem with our science and it's a problem with our science communication. And we don't often talk to people that aren't scientists. So I've got rules. I think about them, GIBBS rules, if you guys remember NCIS and having rules for how to fight crime. Except for these rules are talking to humans. So this is a framework to convey science, best data, and uncertainty to the general public. I've done this with a range of citizens, backgrounds, time periods. I've done this to oil companies. I've done this to Lions clubs. I've done this to Sierra Club. I've done this to politicians. And it works reasonably well. So this is rules that I'm a scientist. I'm not a marketer. I'm not a any of these disciplines that are good at selling you stuff and persuading and things, that you're good at talking about data. But the training would be similar to talking to a doctor about, hey, your patient's dying. How do you want to talk about that? You know, and your basic scientist walks up and goes, you got 6 months, sorry. Right, that's our basic science. Oh, I got data on it, trust me. And you're told, no, you need to be a little more gentle about that and do it a little different way. So that sort of training, or police officers talking to suspects, bang. Okay, now what do we want to talk about? There's some training that could be done to make that better, right? And there's a lot of training about how to deal with confrontation and stuff. Maybe needs to be some more, but there's training. There's not training in science. I didn't go to a class that said, here's how you talk about your science to the public. Never went through that. I did go through a science class that told me how to do science in a courtroom. That was very useful. But a class in saying how to talk to the public, how not to talk to the public about science. It would be handy. And so this is a set of rules that I've developed along the way. Some of them are from other people, some of them are from me. Number one, tell them who you are. So whether I'm talking to a public group, a private group, whether I'm talking to somebody from the TV, newspaper, something like that, step one, I tell them who I am. I'm trying to be neutral. I'm not trying to tell you to shut down the oil industry in Oklahoma. I'm not trying to tell you that we should ignore all the people that notice their houses are shaking and falling down. I welcome feedback on things that don't seem neutral, so I tell them that. I had a guy come up afterwards, he said, I think you're overly neutral. I'm like more Switzerland than Switzerland. And what he wanted was, he wanted me on one of the teams. He said, oh, you talk pretty good. You talk about this. We want you to defend for us. I'm like, I don't think that's going to move the ball forward as fast as telling what the science is and making the science and the data central to the problem. If I'm on one of the teams, I'm just advocating, and my data and science is just as useless as the other side's. But if I'm a referee and say, this is what the science says, hit me with whatever you want to say I'm not being neutral. If I am being neutral, you can hit me all you want, but if I'm just holding up the data become much more powerful. And it moved the ball forward very well in Oklahoma. One of the key things is providing options and not pro-cons from a neutral person. A neutral person doesn't say this is good or bad, right? A neutral person says these are your choices you've got. So telling them who I was, part of that was I'm reasonably friendly. I was dumb enough to wear a tequila shirt because I said I'm a physicist too, and they go, well, what are physicists like? Well, they drank in college. It's okay. Post the last couple of weeks, that's more complicated, but back then it was okay. And then telling them that I had enough background to, okay, this guy seems like he might be able to tell me something about this problem. I took out things that didn't advance the ball to say I might know something about this problem. I got other things I could list. But I try to do something to make myself not feel too I intimidate my students. I'm tall with a deep voice and they're all freaked out by me. So I wanted to seem less freaking out. I also didn't wear a nice sport coat. I always wore corduroy sport coats because if I wore something too nice, I looked like I was from the oil industry. But I tried not doing the tie and I looked like I was an environmental activist. And so a corduroy sport coat and tie is neutral referee. I could have wore the black and white stripe thing, but I never found one that really worked. But it turns out there was the right level. Be two kinds of experts, not four. Two kinds. One that you probably are, science expert, academic training, publishing, that you could, yeah, I know something about this. The other one, Daubert standard expert. The Daubert standard is the Daubert case for legal use of science in the courtroom. And if you meet the Daubert standard, you as an expert can talk in a court of law about a topic because they deem you to be an expert. What that does in a legal sense is it says you've got more slop. You can provide your opinion because you're an expert. And so understanding the Daubert case or the follow-up Como tire, the weird sort of things about evidence in the courtroom, even saying this freaked out the attorneys because they're like, you know something that we know. Scientists aren't supposed to know the word Daubert. I know the Daubert case. I know the Como tire case. What else do you want to know about your legal evidence issues? That freaked them out and immediately put me in a weird place with them. They threw them off, which was useful. So even just using the word Daubert helps you. Look it up. The two that you don't want to be. If I was the guy that wrote all the papers, if I was going to present you an entire set of slides about Halihan's work, I did it this morning. But if I was doing that for earthquakes, then I'm not as believable as an expert because I'm saying I'm the best player on the team, right? I'm the LeBron James of induced seismicity. I wrote all the papers. Well, then you're telling us that you're a smart guy and you're telling us that you know everything and you're trying to get funding for your work, aren't you? So the guy that gets all the funding, you're trying to fund your research. I got accused of trying to fund my research. I'm like, I've never written a grant proposal for induced seismicity. I have no published papers by me in this. I immediately took myself out of the game. I'm not playing in this game. I'm not writing papers. I'm not asking for money. I'm just telling you these things. That was really, really powerful because people tried to throw that at me. They tried to throw he's trying to fund his research, and they tried to throw he's just trying to advertise his research. And they're like, which paper? None of his papers are in these talks. He never cites himself at all. And functionally, in reality, I was reading to the state of Oklahoma. But the groups I talked to, the first time that conference in the library where I got a couple hours of questions, people were asking me, what's a well? What's a well screen? What's a casing? How's an oil well work? About 6 months later, this McGar paper, it says this and this and this. How do I interpret that figure? What do? I'm a farmer. Okay, good. The level of literature knowledge on induced seismicity in Oklahoma is fairly stunning. because I would tell them which papers they want to look at. They would get them, they would look at them, they would send them around, they would discuss them, they'd come back to me, ask questions. There's a bizarre level among the farming community about induced seismicity in Oklahoma. If you want to have a nice discussion, go find a farmer in central Oklahoma. You go, hey, what do you think about McGarr 2014? Oh, that was a great paper. Okay. But I wasn't McGarr and I wasn't getting funding. And I was whacked with that I was doing these things. And so by not doing them, I disarmed people that were saying that I was on one of the teams or that I was on my own team. Here's your question on 2017. Here's earthquakes in black. There's the 900 some odd, 907 or something. Then dropping back down. Okay. Here's my invited presentations. Here's my media interviews. Media interviews correspond to large earthquakes. If we have a large earthquake in Oklahoma, my cell phone will ring within 10 minutes. And I can tell you at least which 3 reporters will call first. Gary mentioned I talked on NPR. Why did I end up on NPR talking to those folks? It's because the earthquake happened on the 1st of January. I was the only guy that answered the phone. I ended up on NPR. I was like, what are they looking for a donation for? Hello? This is Dr. Halihan? How do you know my name? We're looking for you. How'd you find me? So you don't get to show up and give one talk and fix the problem. So if you want to be a referee, you got to go to all the games. So I started off in the library, and then I gave a lot more talks to the Lions clubs and things, and then these interviews and things. This takes time. If we had a large earthquake, I'm looking at my calendar going, oh, geez. And the phone would start ringing and all this stuff would start happening, but I would answer the questions. Because the other thing I made was I made myself a resource to reporters when they had a technical issue. And I answered their questions so that when they reported as accurate data as possible because they felt like it was okay to call me. And so I felt like it was my responsibility to not turn down the call. Yeah?
Question if I may. When did the injections came down from 2 billion to 1 billion?
Right around there. Okay. This is being recorded, but there's a story about that point. Social media. I would get asked when I was talking to reporters, they go, so what book are you selling? I'm not selling a book. Well, what's your Twitter account? I don't have a Twitter account. What about your Facebook? I don't have a Facebook account. Aren't you on social media? No. Why not? Because I say stupid things and making me tired and then giving me a keyboard isn't going to make it better. So science doesn't particularly go fast. Twitter is for conversing. Okay? It's not, we don't do science on Twitter. We go to GSA and chat about things, right? So it's called social media. It's not science media. But I did find something interesting. So I was interviewed, and one of my earliest ones was this little 17-minute piece by Julie Dermansky. And she interviewed me in my office. She was nice enough to tell me how to sit. She tried to light me well and make sure I didn't look too bad. And I was talking to her, and I was a little nervous about talking about earthquakes because I knew this would be a potentially an issue, right? And I didn't have the legal disclaimer yet. I didn't have subpoenas flying at me. I was just a professor who was answering some questions going, I'm going to answer questions. It'll all be fine. So I answered her questions, and she put me up on a couple websites. And so she called me back about a month later, and I went on and said, oh, okay, it is on there. And at the time, it was maybe 250 views. And I'm like, okay. So like 250 people looked at this. And she says, no, that's not how you count. I said, well, it says 250 views. She's like, yeah, but I cross-posted it here. I did this, I did that, I did this, and I did that. I'm like, oh, so I'm like at 500 or something? She says, let me check. I waited a while. Yeah, 50,000 people have watched that. So I had a stadium I gave a talk to. And I was like, well, this is very interesting. And then I had my students. They said, well, you trended on Facebook. So what's that mean? That means a lot of people looked at the video. I'm like, ooh, the dean's going to call. That's the way it happened. But I talked to the students. They said, I used you today. Used me how? Well, there was a big fight and they were debating induced seismicity. They said it wasn't possible to make earthquakes, it wasn't possible to do this and that, so I threw you at them. You did what? Well, my feed, I sent them your video and then had to watch it, and all the people that were screaming about that it's not scientific, I shut them all down. I'm like, you guys fight differently than I do, but this seems interesting. And so I was used as a weapon way outside of my control to argue for the science of it. And by saying I was neutral, and here's the papers you want to look at, here's the references you want. I also got defended by the Secretary of Energy. Somebody was screaming at him and saying, what's he doing on this committee? You know, this guy's trying to destroy the oil industry. He said, have you listened to his talk? I said, no. Well, you should listen to his talk. He's trying to be neutral. He's doing a good job. You might want to listen to it. So I was on social media, but I'm not on social media. So, and I don't have a book to sell. Let me know if I should. What do you look like? So this was the coat and the tie. I came in and gave a talk, and I learned something new. I walked in, and the guy walks up, hey, Dr. Halihan, how are you? I said, oh, I'm good. And I'm not good with names. I'm decent with faces. I had no idea who this guy was. And I'm struggling, and he's so happy to see me, and I'm like, former student, works at an agency. I'm going through, and I must have looked very puzzled. He says, oh, you don't know me. I've watched you on YouTube. You wore the same sport coat. I'm like, yeah, okay. Because I kept wearing this. I had a set of I found them really cheap at Belk's. They were 20 bucks. My wife found them. Nice corduroy sport coat. It looks very professory without looking too oily and without looking too environmental. So it was an outfit. But in terms of the science, people trust taller. I get to say stuff that short people don't. And you immediately believe it. And it's very strange. I had a student. She was almost 4 foot. And I said, you need a Ph.D. And she said, why? I said, because otherwise you need to grow a foot. I said, if you want to convey your thoughts, you need some sort of cards, and being tall helps. Being deeper voice helps. You actually get more salary because of this fact. People go along with what you say because the voice is deep, I'm tall. I must be telling the truth. So I practice telling my wife lies all the time, and I still manage once or twice a year. Left-handed works, which is a strange thing. You guys are right-handed. How many left-handers we got? You guys don't trust me. And I'll tell you why. If you're left-handed, you trust the left side. Okay? So if I wave at you like this, the left-handers trust that. I'm left-handed, I move this hand. Right-handers trust that side. How big of an effect could that be? It's very debatable, but Reagan was left-handed. Bush was left-handed. Clinton was left-handed. In '92, you could vote for Clinton or Bush or Ross Perot, who was also left-handed. You only had a choice of 3 left-handers. Obama was left-handed. McCain was left-handed. You could only vote for 2 left-handers that year. This is the first election we had. The latest election was the first election without a left-hander since before Reagan. And trust was a big issue. You immediately trust left-handed people. So if you want to get elected to office, go find a left-hander and put them into office. Quickest way to do it. But most of your presidents, once you go into a video age where people watch things, there's some sort of innate trust of moving in this hand. So tell your right-handed candidates, keep their hand inside and move this one. Short names also work. If you're 4 letters or smaller, you get more money. And I'm just Todd. I didn't even get a middle name, so I'm distinctly short on names. And so those are like intuitive things that you go, well, I'm a short, high-voiced right-hander with the name of like that. Sorry, we don't trust you. And you go, well, that seems very unfair. True, but it's a factor in these sorts of things. I also had a person, they said, I got done with the talk, and she goes, you were the middle kid, weren't you? I was like, yeah. And she's like, yeah, you're always trying to make people happy. Try to moderate. I'm like, yeah. So these things I couldn't get around, but they were advantages to me because I was tall with a deep voice and left-handed. But I found they were more of a factor than I expected. You should know what media do. So you tell them who you are. I would be very explicit with that at the beginning. Here's what I'm about. I'm trying to be the neutral agent If you've got questions about a paper, if you've got questions about the literature, you may find somebody else to tell you that, but if you got a question you want to ask me, I'll answer it. Try not to look stiff and unapproachable. Try not to talk like a scientist. Don't constrain your answers. I had a lot of the press, they said, well, we've called this person, but they'll only answer questions about their papers because they don't want to extend beyond there and give an answer that's inappropriate. Like, well, what scientist is then? I was told by a couple folks in my university, maybe you should just write some grants. Don't go talk about this stuff. And writing a grant, if I have a 5.8 hit underneath a school in Oklahoma and drop it, because that would happen if that occurred, if we lined up the high fives that were occurring with a nice school full of kids. If I line that up and drop it, well, I feel good that I got that grant funded. Not so much. So I'm going to keep talking, and that's what I chose to do. But this constraint of answers, I've talked broadly. And did you ever say something stupid? Yes. Basically, when you're being interviewed on TV, it's a PowerPoint slide. I didn't think about this until I talked to a TV guy, and he's like, if you ever watch the camera for a movie or for the news, it's a PowerPoint slide where somebody's talking. We don't actually move the camera. We don't do these things. It's just a video PowerPoint slide. So think about it like PowerPoint, and you're sitting in there as the slide. That's really useful, because I was always worried about motion and the movement of everything. And there's no motion. It's a set picture. Make friends. Most of the reporters, if they like you, they're not going to make you look like an idiot, which is super handy. So try not to be demeaning to them and try to make sure that they like you reasonably well. It goes easier because they're going to go edit your statements, and they're going to try to, 90+% were trying to convey the facts. And that was great. They were trying to convey, what do we know about this problem? What are you telling me about this problem? I've got these questions. And they were trying to figure out what I was telling them and convey that to the public. Most of them were trying that. A few tried to fish for quotes. And they would say, what they would do is they'd throw out a quote and get me to try to repeat it back to them, and then claim it was me. Because, yeah, I did say it, but I was just repeating what you said. And the one that was the most difficult that I haven't solved yet is I'm used to talking to an audience. I watch whether you guys are awake. I watch whether you smile, whether you tilt your head, whether you're a little confused. When you're interviewed on TV and you've got this magical stuff going on, I got into interviews where I was sat in a chair that didn't fit me, put on a mic, and put a camera in front of me. And in my ear, somebody's asking me questions. And I can't see what's going on, and I can't see what they're saying. I just hear what they're saying. Turns out I can't do that. I need to see them because that's how I'm used to communicating. And I found that massively difficult to answer questions with somebody talking in your ear and you looking at a box that's black. If you're good at that, you can go on TV. But if I ended up doing this again, I would demand that I have a monitor of the person asking me questions before I do an interview, because I can't do it without it. What I did for one of them, I was supposed to talk on CBS, and they said, okay, well, we're going to do this, you got to talk to air. And I said, okay, you're the dude that set up the lights. Could you stand behind the camera and at least nod and stuff as I'm talking? He said, yeah, okay. And so he stood and listened to me, and I was watching his face to get my cues. And that's the way I talked to the box. But that was one of the hardest things I found was talking to air. It's super, super hard. If you were to go to the Himalayas, and you go climb up the mountain through the snow and do all this stuff, and you find this guy and you ask what the meaning of life is, he will tell you, and you'll go, wow, I now know. If that guy comes up to you in Walmart, says, I got the meaning of life for you, you run. So you got to have people ask to get the facts from the referee. They got to say, hey, I want you to come to the event and play referee. And there was times where I knew stuff that I'm like, I got to go tell them. And I'm like, yeah, that's not going to work. They're going to think I'm pushing some agenda on them. And so I had to kind of wait for different things. And usually that sort of feeling cleared in about a month. There'd be things that were going on and would fix that issue. And I would talk to some people on the side, but I couldn't go public with something that I knew without being asked. And so that rule is one of the trickier ones that you'll feel it when it's there of, yeah, I can't go tell them this yet because they're not ready for that and they got to ask for it. We talked about this already. Pros and cons are a team. You're not on a team, so you tell them about options. That's what you get to tell them. And they might say, well, is that a good option or a bad option? You go, It's one of your options, and you can give them the context of it, but you don't define good or bad. And people in Oklahoma are like, well, why don't we regulate this? I said, well, the voters in Oklahoma voted for a low regulatory environment. They voted for drill, baby, drill. So if you want that to be a different regulatory environment, you can have voters choose something different, but currently the setup is that you want very low amounts of regulation. I'm not telling you that that's right or wrong. I'm telling you that's what got voted in, so you can make a decision about that. But people wanted me to change the regulatory environment, or they wanted me to change this or that. I gave them their options, and sometimes they were very frustrated by that because I didn't fix it. I just told them, you could do that, and I would tell them what that meant, right? I'd tell them what side effects there would be, what the cost would be, or what the different factors are. But this came out of the folks that do extension, and they said they do a lot of talks about how to build fences. And when you build fences, people get mad, right? And so the lawyer who built fences, like, you never tell them pro and con, because that says that's good and that's bad. You get in a lot of trouble real quick. So you tell them what their options are. And that was one of really good pieces of advice. You're unpopularly anonymous, right? You guys know Oscar Ruiz? He's one of the 10 greatest football referees of all time. You know, so think of your favorite sport and go, here's 5 players in my favorite sport. Okay, now name 5 referees in your favorite sport. You tend to be anonymous, and that's okay. And people were surprised after the seismicity dropped off, and they said, well, you're not on TV anymore. Nobody called me. Well, you don't want to be on TV? Like, not particularly. Well, you were on TV a lot. I'm like, well, I was doing my job. So you're unpopular. People always scream at the ref, right? If the call doesn't go their way, the ref's the guy to blame. And you're pretty much anonymous. So it's not a ticket to social media fame. It's a way to solve an environmental problem. And I would love to be able to yellow card and red card people in the game, but I just tell them data. Slide-wise, they're not science slides. You're not defending yourself at a science meeting. So I like this one with Frank thinking his doctor was a quack. You're doing it the way doctors do it. These guys dress up to give you faith in what they're doing, right? The doctor shows up in a tie-dye t-shirt and a couple of earrings, and he goes, yeah, I think we'll cut you open today. You go, you get the guy in the white coat with a little stethoscope. Can I get that guy instead? So it's all about making people feel comfortable and having faith. So having all the references to help to have faith, dressing the way I dressed helped, being tall with a deep voice helped. It was all lined up to make people feel as comfortable with the doctor visit as possible. Making it feel like the patient can ask questions, right? So if you go to the doctors, they tell you it's really hard to get patients to ask questions about their health. So getting the patient to feel comfortable asking questions. And it was really funny. Sometimes it was a discussion of 3 people reading, this paper, and they want to understand it, and the people around them are going, people in this room read a paper? Those guys are all geologists. No, that's a farmer, that's a housekeeper, that one works in a factory, and that one works in the local post office, and it's like they were debating this paper. And the people around were going, this is a really weird process, and it's like, yeah, but they felt comfortable asking those folks about, hey, what do you think about this? Is this guy telling us the truth? And they're like, yeah, he's given us this paper, and this paper, and so that trust went out from those networks of people. Peer-reviewed only. So if you're going to have them trust it, don't make your own graphics. Even plotting up earthquakes, I used the USGS plot. I colored it better than they did, but I used their plot. So I improved it, I colored them, I might have redrafted them, but they were referenceable to, I'm going to blame Smith, I'm going to blame Jones. I never blame myself. Reference every slide you can find and provide the list of references at the end. I had one of the state reps, and after I gave my talk, he said, so is that work available? I already had it printed out. Here's your list of references. Ask me any questions you want. Almost every state legislature in Oklahoma knows me. Half of them asked to have me fired, but they know me. Regulators aren't the ref, okay? Whenever you get problems with regulators, they always go, well, the regulator's working for the other side. The corporation bought him off, or he's just trying to destroy the industry. So The Brits actually did this. They actually had sort of a referee function and they had a regulator function. They said, oh, those are the same thing. They combined them. They split them back apart again. It's not the same thing. Regulation and doing those things, there's the NTSB and there's the FAA. So the airlines have, it's very different, and that's a good demo of those different functions. They're not the same function. One that I would like, somebody should pay the ref. I got cookies, I got coffee, I got gas money a couple times. So, you know, if you came up with some sort of protocols for how the refs go in the future, there'd be neutral science experts that, okay, well, we're going to assign somebody, you guys are dealing with bad water. So Flint, Michigan, right? Okay, well, you guys have problems with your water supply. Boom, we send up the referee. Because there's a whole bunch of people that think Flint's trying to kill them, and a whole bunch of people that, you know, are trying to solve the problem. And where's the problem at? What do we know about it? And can we get some feedback on that? So it takes a lot of time, and if it got paid, you could actually do it. And where's the funds come from? Something neutral. But I don't know if people would sign up for what I did on their own commonly. I put one of these in here to show you the opposite version. So these guys are incredibly proud of their climate diagram that explains fully the climate issue. And we have two different thermometers because we can't measure temperature. We have all these things, we have all these things and all these things, and you can't see anything on there. And trust me, if you looked at it close, I looked at it close for a long time. I have no idea what it's supposed to tell me about the climate. But like the whole paper was, we've created a diagram that tells us everything. Like, yeah, but it tells nobody anything. Told you something. So there's really bad ways to do data, and that's one of them. So questions on being a ref?
The preceding program was brought to you as a community service lecture by the Edwards Aquifer Authority. For more information, visit edwardsaquifer.org.